Good evening once again. I'm Stephanie Ruhle. Welcome to our continuing coverage of the Republican National Convention. With 113 days until the election, today the RNC opened with a historic backdrop. The classified documents case against Donald Trump was dismissed in Florida, and it has been just over 48 hours since the assassination attempt on the former president. We'll have more on that later on in the hour. But right now, all eyes are on Milwaukee, as the Republican presidential nominee made a surprise appearance after he was injured on Saturday. Earlier this evening, delegates from all 50 states officially selected Trump. He then took to social media to announce that J.D. Vance would be his running mate. Vance is the junior senator from Ohio and author of Hillbilly Elegy. He used to trash Donald Trump all over town before becoming a Trump superfan. And in his first interview since joining the 2024 ticket, he talked about that very change of heart.
I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great president, and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans because, again, he delivered that peace and prosperity. If you go back to what I thought in 2016, another thing that was going on, Sean, is I bought into the media's lies and distortions. I bought into this idea that somehow he was going to be so different, a terrible threat to democracy. It was a joke. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to throw his political opposition in jail. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to undermine American law and order. President Trump did a really good job.
Vice President Kamala Harris called Senator Vance to congratulate him, but the Biden campaign was quick to say that Vance would enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law. With that, let's bring in our lead-off panel tonight. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who is in Milwaukee on the floor of the convention this evening. John Allen is with us, senior national politics reporter for NBC. All right, Vaughn, you were on the convention floor all day and tonight. Tell us what we need to know.
I think the headline here is, number one, Stephanie, seeing Donald Trump here walk down or walk up those stairs there with the bandage on his ear. When the video board here in the convention hall first showed him, the room immediately stood up and began to cheer. There were chants of fight, fight, fight. Of course, when he was lifted up from the stage after being shot just over 48 hours ago and he lifted his arm up in the air, that is what you could read his lips saying, fight, fight, fight. This is a base of support around him of delegates who are the party activists. They are the elected officials that are the backbone of today's Republican Party under Donald Trump. And to listen to this place was Lee Greenwood performed his God Bless the USA, which is the song that he typically walks out to at every single rally when Donald Trump comes and takes the stage. And for minutes, just allowing the audience to applaud. It was really, it told the story of the last 8 years in a lot of ways. And this is a Republican Party that questioned what its future was going to be after 2021. And it's the Republican base of support, the elected officials. These delegates, these party activists were the ones that got solidarity behind him a year ago, despite the likes of Governor DeSantis, Nikki Haley, others coming into the fray. And Donald Trump is the one here on convention night, night number one, who is standing here with this party his yet again, Stephanie.
John, after the presidential debate, I spoke to all sorts of business guys in New York who said Donald Trump is now going to go for independence. They're up for grabs. He's going to pivot to the middle. He's going to focus on his legacy. And then he chooses J.D. Vance. OK, Mitt Romney once famously said, I don't know that I can disrespect someone more than J.D. Vance. You covered his Senate campaign. This notion that Donald Trump is ever going to pivot to the middle and look something like a traditional Republican, that flew right out the window when he picked J.D. tonight, huh?
I mean, J.D. Vance is to the MAGA side of Donald Trump, if that's possible, right? We've heard Donald Trump, basically try to find his position on Ukraine over time, struggle around for it. J.D. Vance is somebody who has been against continued U.S. support for Ukraine and its war against Russia and its defensive war against Russia. Vance has basically voted the MAGA line and sometimes led it in the U.S. Senate. So this is absolutely not a pick for the middle. I think there are a lot of boxes that J.D. Vance checks for Donald Trump. Number one comes from the Rust Belt. There's going to be a huge push from Trump to try to win not Ohio, not J.D. Vance's state, because Trump is in good position to win that already, but Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those blue wall states that are so important for Democrats in order to get an electoral college majority. So that's part of what he's looking at. Part of it is J.D. Vance is half of Trump's age. Kamala Harris is a generation younger than Biden and Trump, 59 years old. And then J.D. Vance at 39 is a generation younger than she is. He is, making an appeal to turn the page to a much younger generation. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Stephanie. J.D. Vance is nobody's moderate.
All right, gentlemen, I want to bring Susan Glasser, staff writer for The New Yorker, into our conversation. She joins us from Milwaukee tonight. Susan, President Biden called J.D. Vance a clone of Trump. Whether there's a clone of him or not, what voters does J.D. Vance bring in to possibly vote for Trump that Trump didn't already have?
Well, I don't think Trump looks at it about in that way, Steph, right? Donald Trump believes that the entire appeal of the Republican ticket is based on himself in many ways. And I think that's an important thing to remember. He can certainly signal to constituencies, and the signal here, loud and clear, is that this is an all MAGA ticket. I think that is part of the message to the Trump faithful. The other part, as John pointed out, is to the extent that the battleground states are still in play, he sees Vance as someone who can appeal to those core voters. It's certainly not a message about expanding the electoral base from Donald Trump. You could say that it's a confident decision, that this is from a candidate who thinks he's in pretty good shape right now. It's hard to see that suburban women voters are going to be very drawn in by J.D. Vance. You're giving me a big smile with that one, but look, it's all about the MAGA, and he sees this as somebody put it best, a mega MAGA ticket.
A mega MAGA ticket. Vaughn, I'm guessing mega MAGA is exactly what that convention floor was looking for tonight.
It absolutely is. And J.D. Vance is absolutely right. Susan and John hit it on the head, I think, in terms of also where even after Donald Trump, right? After, let's say, 10 years from now, J.D. Vance will be 49 years old. When you look at some others in the Republican Party today, you have J.D. Vance, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Josh Hawley. There is a younger generation here that goes beyond even elected officials, though. You're watching delegates here that make up the backbone of the Republican Party. These are going to be the leaders of the party of the future. Of course, parties have their movements within themselves, and in no way it is necessarily MAGA something that is resigned to existing in the Republican Party for decades to come, but at least in the immediate years to come, this is that. Tucker Carlson, you saw him in the front row next to Byron Donalds. In a lot of ways, Speaker Johnson, who I think is a little bit more of the old traditional conservative evangelical route, is not even that much of the celebrity around these parts. When Tucker Carlson walked into that front row with Donald Trump, everybody started hooting and hollering and trying to get pictures with him. When Speaker Johnson, it was a little bit different. And I think the same thing with Glenn Youngkin. When Glenn Youngkin took the stage, of course, it's somebody that was able to effectively win the state of Virginia, yet the base of support within this Republican Party is still clear, and it's clear who the heroes and the superstars of this party are, and it's those that have really become the MAGA allies of Donald Trump in these past years.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.